I was 24 when I got invited to my first real influencer event in Los Angeles. My cousin Brianna had started getting popular on TikTok, and one of the brands she worked with invited her to a huge after-party following a music awards show. She asked if I wanted to come because she didn't want to go alone. At the time, I was working a boring office job in Ohio and had never experienced anything remotely glamorous, so obviously I said yes. The party was being held at this giant rooftop hotel in downtown LA. There were photographers outside, expensive cars pulling up every few minutes, and security guards everywhere checking names against tablets. The second we walked in, I already felt out of place. Everyone looked unreal. Perfect clothes, perfect makeup, perfect teeth. It honestly felt less like a party and more like being dropped into a movie set. First, though, it was fun. Brianna knew a lot of people there, so we floated around meeting influencers, DJs, photographers, random athletes, and a bunch of people I couldn't recognize but pretended to. Music blasted across the rooftop while lights flashed over the pool area. There were bars on every corner and people dancing everywhere. Around midnight, Brianna disappeared with some girls she knew to go take pictures somewhere downstairs. I stayed near the rooftop bar because I didn't really feel like standing around taking Instagram photos for an hour. That's when I first noticed him. He was standing alone near the edge of the rooftop looking directly at me. Not casually looking, staring. He was older than most people there, maybe late 30s, wearing a dark gray suit with no tie. Everyone else looked flashy and trendy, but he looked normal. Too normal. When our eyes met, he smiled. Not a friendly smile. One of those smiles where somebody acts like they already know you. I looked away immediately. A few minutes later, I moved toward the pool area and started talking to a bartender while waiting for Brianna to text me. Then I noticed the same man again reflected in the glass behind the bar, still staring. At that point, I started getting uncomfortable. I checked my phone and saw no messages from Brianna, so I figured I'd go downstairs and find her. The hotel itself was huge and confusing. The rooftop elevator opened into this long hallway with conference rooms, bathrooms, and service corridors branching off everywhere. Music echoed through the walls, but the farther I walked, the quieter everything got. I finally texted Brianna asking where she was. No response. I kept walking past a row of empty meeting rooms when I suddenly heard footsteps behind me. Slow footsteps. I turned around expecting maybe hotel staff or another guest, but the hallway was empty. Then I heard them again. Closer. I started walking faster. That's when my phone buzzed with a text from Brianna saying, "Still downstairs taking pics. Where are you?" Before I could answer, I heard a man's voice behind me say, "You shouldn't walk around alone here." I spun around so fast I nearly dropped my phone. It was him, the guy from upstairs, standing maybe 15 feet away in the hallway. Up close, something about him felt wrong. His smile never fully reached his eyes. He looked completely calm while I instantly felt panic crawling up my chest. I forced myself to laugh awkwardly and said, "I'm just looking for my cousin." He nodded slowly. "I know." That sentence hit me like ice water. I immediately started backing away while pretending not to freak out. He took one slow step forward, then another. I turned and walked quickly toward the elevators, but when I pressed the button, nothing happened. The elevator was still on another floor. Behind me, the footsteps kept coming. Slow, unhurried. I didn't want to look back, but I finally did. He had stopped halfway down the hallway and was just standing there watching me again. Then he pointed toward a nearby service hallway and calmly said, "Your cousin went that way." Every alarm bell in my body went off at once. I knew he was lying. I grabbed my phone and immediately called Brianna. The second she answered, I loudly said, "Where are you right now?" She sounded confused. "Still downstairs near the ballroom." The man's smile disappeared completely. And that's when he started walking toward me fast. Not running, but fast enough that panic fully took over. I bolted. I ran past the elevators and into the crowded lobby area where security and hotel guests were everywhere. I turned around expecting him to still be behind me, but he was gone. Just completely gone. I found Brianna downstairs about 10 minutes later near a photo booth. She immediately knew something was wrong because I was shaking so hard I could barely explain what happened. She kept insisting it was probably some drunk, creepy guy trying to flirt, but I knew it was more than that. The way he spoke to me, the way he said he knew who I was with, none of it felt normal. We left the party early after that. Back at our Airbnb, I finally started calming down. We locked the doors, turned on the TV, and tried distracting ourselves with dumb YouTube videos before bed. Around 3 a.m., Brianna fell asleep on the couch. I was still awake scrolling through Instagram when I heard a soft knock at the sliding glass door leading to the backyard. 3 slow knocks. I froze. Another knock. I slowly looked toward the curtains. At first, I couldn't see anything through the glass. Then a face leaned into view. Him, standing outside in the dark, smiling. I screamed so loudly Brianna woke up instantly. The second the room lights came on, the backyard was empty. We called the police immediately, but they found nothing outside. No footprints. No signs of forced entry. Nothing. The next morning, though, Brianna noticed something sitting on the patio table outside. One of her event wristbands. The exact one she lost at the hotel earlier that night. Neither of us ever figured out how it got there. 2 years ago, my boyfriend Ethan and I drove through Nevada during a road trip from Arizona to California. We were trying to save money, so instead of booking nice hotels, we stayed in cheap roadside motels along the way. Most of them were exactly what you'd expect. Old carpets, flickering lights, questionable bathrooms. But one place still freaks me out to this day. It was somewhere outside a tiny desert town I honestly can't even remember anymore. We arrived close to midnight after driving for almost 9 straight hours. The motel looked abandoned when we pulled in. Only 3 cars sat in the parking lot. The office lights were dim, and there was this old neon vacancy sign buzzing loudly in the dark. Inside the office sat this older woman watching a tiny TV behind the counter. She barely looked at us while checking us in. What I remember most was her saying, "If anybody knocks tonight, don't answer." Then she just handed us the key. At first Ethan and I laughed about it because we assumed she was just some weird old lady. But the second we got to our room, the vibe changed completely. The room smelled strange. Not dirty exactly, more like wet concrete and cigarettes. The lamp near the bed flickered non-stop, and the curtains wouldn't fully close. Ethan joked that the place looked like a motel from a serial killer documentary. Neither of us slept much that first hour because we could hear arguing outside. A man and woman. At first it sounded far away, but eventually the voices moved closer to our room. The woman sounded upset. The man sounded calm. Too calm. Then suddenly everything went quiet. A few minutes later, there was a knock on our door. 3 soft knocks. Ethan immediately looked at me. I whispered, "Don't open it." We stayed completely silent. Then we heard a woman's voice outside. "Please help me." I remember every hair on my body standing up. She sounded terrified. Ethan stood up instantly, but I grabbed his arm and reminded him what the motel owner said. Another knock. "Please." He won't leave me alone. Ethan looked genuinely conflicted. I could tell part of him wanted to help. Then came the sentence that changed everything. The woman outside suddenly said, "I know you're awake." Every bit of fear in me exploded, because her tone changed completely. She no longer sounded scared. She sounded annoyed. Ethan slowly backed away from the door. We both stayed dead silent. About 30 seconds later, we heard footsteps walking away. Then another set of footsteps. A man's footsteps. We barely slept after that. Around maybe 4 a.m., I happened to glance out through the small gap in the curtains. Two people stood across the parking lot under a streetlight. A man and woman, just standing there, facing our room, watching. I immediately pulled away from the window. At sunrise, we packed our stuff in under 5 minutes and practically ran to the car. Before leaving, Ethan stopped by the office to return the key. The old woman looked at him and asked, "They knocked, didn't they?" Ethan just nodded. Then the woman sighed and quietly said, "They do that to every couple that stays here." We asked what she meant. She explained that the man and woman had apparently been caught multiple times trying to lure guests outside at night so they could rob them. But then she added something else, something way worse. She said the police arrested them almost 3 years earlier, both of them, for murdering a traveler at that same motel. Ethan and I left immediately after hearing that. To this day, I still don't know if she was telling the truth, trying to scare us, or if we really saw something we shouldn't have. Last winter, I took a red-eye flight from Chicago to Seattle for work. I've always hated flying at night because something about airplanes already feels unnatural, and being trapped in one while everyone sleeps makes it worse. The flight itself started normal. I boarded late, found my seat, threw in headphones, and prepared to sleep through the trip. A young woman sat beside me in seat 14C. She looked around my age, maybe mid-20s, wearing a gray hoodie and holding one of those airport coffees. She seemed nervous from the start. Not scared of flying nervous, more like distracted nervous. She kept glancing toward the back of the plane every few minutes. Eventually I joked, "You okay?" She forced a smile and said, "Yeah, I think someone's following me." I laughed awkwardly because I assumed she was joking. She wasn't. She quietly explained that she'd noticed the same man in 2 different airports during her layovers that day. She said every time she moved gates, he somehow ended up nearby. I told her it was probably coincidence. But then during boarding, I noticed him too. A tall man wearing a black baseball cap, standing near the back of the plane, watching our row. At first, I didn't think much of it, until halfway through the flight. Most passengers were asleep by then. Cabin lights were dim, and the plane was almost silent except for engine noise. I woke up because the girl beside me suddenly grabbed my arm hard enough to hurt. I looked over and saw she was staring down the aisle. The man in the black cap stood there, just standing, not moving, looking directly at her. A flight attendant approached him asking if he needed help. He smiled and casually said he was stretching his legs. Then he slowly walked away toward the bathroom. The girl beside me looked terrified now. She whispered, "That's him." At this point, even I felt uneasy. I asked if she wanted me to call a flight attendant over, but she shook her head and said she didn't want to cause a scene unless something actually happened. About 20 minutes later, she got up to use the restroom and didn't come back. At first, I assumed there was a line. Then 5 minutes passed, then 10. Finally, I got worried enough to walk toward the back of the plane myself. One of the flight attendants stopped me and asked if I needed something. I asked if she'd seen the girl from seat 14C. The flight attendant looked confused. Then she said something that made my stomach drop. "Seat 14C has been empty the whole flight." I literally laughed because I thought she misunderstood. I told her no, the girl in the gray hoodie sitting beside me. The flight attendant checked the seating chart again, then looked back at me strangely. "There's nobody assigned to that seat." At that point, I honestly thought I was losing my mind from exhaustion. I went back to my row. The seat beside me was empty. No coffee, no hoodie, nothing. But tucked halfway under the seat was a folded napkin. I picked it up. Written on it in shaky handwriting were 5 words. "He knows where I live." I immediately showed the flight attendant. The crew searched the bathrooms and rear cabin area, but apparently nobody matching her description was anywhere on the plane. When we landed in Seattle, police briefly questioned me because of how shaken I looked. I told them everything: the girl, the man, the note. One officer finally asked me to describe the man again. When I did, his expression changed immediately. He quietly stepped away and spoke to another officer. A few minutes later, I saw two police officers escorting a man in a black baseball cap out of the terminal in handcuffs. I never found out exactly who he was, and nobody ever explained how a person could apparently sit beside me for almost 3 hours without appearing on the passenger list.